You're listening to Beyond the Surface with Faith Davis, a commitment to authenticity and the truths we inherently share. In this episode, we will be discussing my experience within the Black American family and how important it is to leave toxic situations. There's something so radical about speaking against the hardwiring of staying silent. Black households especially like to keep secrets because what matters to them is how things look, not how they truly are. Interestingly enough, anyone with sense can look into these families and see trouble from a mile away. But the Black families like to participate in something called harmonious dysfunction, and it sounds exactly like what it means. My family looked good on paper. My mom owned a business, my older sister was smart and talented, my father worked for the state, my aunt worked in high-end fashion, and my grandmother owned a house. My parents were married for 17 years, and for a short period of time had their own house. Things just seemed dandy from the outside looking in, not to mention my mom was legitimately stunning. She had a similar energy to mine, and if you know, you know. But beyond the surface, things were insane. My dad was beating and cheating on my mom. Then she cheated back and fell in love, and they got divorced. My mom started beating my sister and I. My new stepdad was a literal murderer who had been in jail for 14 years. My dad became the absent father you always hear jokes about. My sister was so depressed she could barely function and left the house at 16 to live with my aunt in New York. My aunt was so immersed in the capitalistic game, she stopped seeing me as a person the older I grew. And my grandmother was in such disarray about her own marriage failing and falling apart, she followed my aunt everywhere. She's the oldest child, my aunt is. And every single interaction was forced and fake. As a child, I had to grow up fast because I realized I was surrounded by children in adult bodies. And no one in the Black community wanted to open up. Emotions had to be shut down and everything needed to look perfect. I couldn't stand it. I actively fought against feeling like I had to lie about my emotions for the sake of someone else's comfort, or talk to other family members while trying to seek genuine closeness because everyone has their walls up and you can't authentically connect with someone who isn't even themselves. Most of my family had all been lying to themselves, and I couldn't see it at such a young age. It's criminal. We love to trauma bond, and it's one of the most unhealthy ways to connect, in my opinion. I think it's just unhealthy in general. I think if you look that up, therapists are going to say, yeah, a trauma bond is shaky. And I feel like we as Black people have an issue with being questioned. There's a lack of understanding in our community because we don't have a good relationship with asking questions and experiencing genuine answers without the threat of harm or being ostracized, because the Black family loves to cut ties with people and make them the bad guy as well. My experience wasn't a good one. I'm no contact, and it's been that way for about 3 years now. And the positive changes I've seen in myself are uncanny. When I tell you the negative effects, though, that they are there and they are brutal, just because I had to stay in that environment for so long. And I mean, I told you guys in the previous episode, I tell you about my disorders. And I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and borderline personality disorder. My brain has legitimately been rewired and was wired differently from the average human being because of all the abuse and toxicity. I literally have a chemical imbalance from the way I was raised and have to fix it. And it's like my sense of self was completely disregarded in the Black household. If it wasn't in service of the family or specifically my mom, I had no purpose. And don't even get me started on the complete and utter devotion my family had to Jesus and Christianity and following the rules on how to be a good person. All it did was make them the most critical human beings I've ever met.
And I even saw a video today on TikTok speaking about how there's no such thing as true constructive criticism, because at its core, it's just a criticism. And you're hurting people, you know what I mean? Especially if that person has not, I guess, revealed that to themselves or has seen that in themselves. And I feel like we are just, as a people, the most critical human beings I've ever met. And I know a lot of other Black people can co-sign this, because we know that our community judges each other harsher than we even judge our oppressor. The idea of being a servant has fried our mind to free thinking, and it shows. And I say this to say that I'm seeing all of these Black creators, and even just a recent one named Mr. Prada, who allegedly murdered his therapist because he had sexually assaulted him. And he's one of many of these creators that I'm seeing who are just posting their trauma and posting that they feel lost and that they need help, and they're confused about who they are in this world. And it's crazy to feel like in our community it has become accepted. It is the norm. And even if it's harmful, I feel like people would rather follow rules of old than create something new. But if we're going to create true freedom and you're in a toxic household, you can't keep justifying, your family's dynamic because you feel like, okay, well, then I won't have anyone. And if anyone can understand feeling like you don't have anyone, I can understand that. But the toxic effects that are coming off on you are gonna be so much stronger than you realize, because when you leave those situations, and I think a lot of people, like, even if you're not Black, you know exactly what it's like when you were younger and you went to other people's homes, right? Say you had a friend and you go over for a play date and you see, wow, their family interaction is different. My mother doesn't talk to me like this, or have patience with me like this, or, or forcing me to eat, and just all this kinds of stuff that you see other people weren't experiencing. And it's like, you try to make it normal in your mind because as a kid, you're just trying to survive. But the consequences of being in unhealthy soil will ruin you, and you cannot save your entire family or believe that you're the person who is supposed to save them, because you, even deep down, you know that it's not going to come from a healthy place, you wanting to save them all, because it's going to come from a feeling of obligation instead of true, like, oh, let me do this. Because you yourself, 9 times out of 10, I think I talked about this previously too, like, a lot of Black people, somebody will escape poverty. It's like one person will, they'll be a RN, or they'll do something, and they are in a different tax bracket. But it's like, if you keep looking back to try to help a whole entire community that feels like it's okay to just perpetuate all of these toxic things that at the end of the day cause them as human beings to ruin themselves, it's like, you can't fix that. And that is not about, classism. That's just about mindset. That's about, do you want better for your own life? And I think a lot of people are very complacent and okay with their suffering because it justifies their actions. You get what I mean? Because I know, especially growing up, a lot of Black people will act like they'll kind of project on kids or younger adults and then like laugh about it with other adults, and it's like they use the kids to validate themselves. So it's like in the Black household and family dynamic, there's this bouncing off of each other for validation, but instead of I would say like a combined validation where it's like, okay, my mom or dad validate my emotions and I validate their emotions. And even if I'm not supposed to be validating their emotions, it's not a parentified thing because the ball is in their court and they're leading and teaching me. it's like in the black household, that is not the case. It's like, you're going to validate my emotions because I'm going to go off on you about how you cost money and how you are here, and I just am frustrated that I even birthed you at all. And you know what I mean? Like that whole rhetoric of really just not even wanting you or preparing for you as a human being to come into this world or be a part of the family as you start to grow. Because then it's like a lot of black people too think that their kids are intentionally being like nasty or being shady. Like there's all these little innuendos of like, oh, that child knows what they're doing, and they project on the kids a lot. It gets really crazy in my opinion. And it's just like, I feel like people see it all the time, but they don't want to speak on it because of what I said before, because black people don't really like when somebody says something to them. And like I said before, the call comes from inside the house because I cannot stand when people ask me 1,000,001 questions. But I have had to learn that people are asking questions for clarity. They're not asking questions in the way that my family was, where it's an interrogation, where you're trying to like find the lie and, you know, make me feel like anything I say that's not the wording specifically of what you want, that I'm about to get in trouble. It's like, instead of feeling that we are being asked questions out of like fear, like someone's about to hurt us, we need to change our perspective and be like, okay, maybe someone's asking questions because they are genuinely interested. And it's like, all of these things, I know to some other people may seem like, oh, that's basic, like that's normal. But I'm promising you guys, I'm telling you, like apart from basic manners and, you know, how to act at the dinner table and like certain things that, like I said, pertain to everything looking a certain way, it's like the internal stuff beyond the surface stuff in our being wasn't taken care of, because everything that they were focused on was surviving, was paying the bills, was everything else. And then when they had their own little fun, it's like the kids continue to be disregarded and just, okay, go to school, you know, go, do whatever. And at some point, I don't even want to connect with you anymore because you're just a reflection of everything that I hate in myself. And I feel like that's just so many black families. And I saw it so much growing up, because my dad's side of the family is, you know, those pictures where it's like, oh, my mom's side and my dad's side. It's exactly like that. My dad's side is what I would consider like the hood side. Like I got a cousin named Peaches and, you know, that kind of life. But then on my mom's side, it's like this bougie capitalist side where it's like, ooh, we're better. We're going to do better and change and, you know, be with the white people. And it just like that kind of pattern. It creates some real interesting people. The duality is crazy. That's all I'll say. But what I really need to get across is that you deserve to develop as a person. But you can't delude yourself to beliefs that negate that truth, even if those ideas come from your family. So to all my black young people, take a moment to question yourself, to question it all. Because your greater good may not always be attached to your family. Not saying that it isn't, but I just need you, for me, to check on it. Because I'm tired of seeing these things perpetuated and then your life is in shambles because you realize too late that you never got to be your own person. And that's unfair, especially to my women. Especially you guys. The cycle of, you know, the men impregnating us young and then you're trapped and you feel less than, now you a baby mama and this whole thing, like even, you know, you saw it right in the media about the Halle and DDG thing. It's like this pattern and continues, it keeps on happening. And I just need us to value who we are enough to recognize that this stuff starts at home in our community, regardless of how we may elevate individually in it.
In the next episode, we will be discussing motherhood.